At my mother's birthday party, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Ethan, you'll never be as good as your brother." I didn't flinch. I reached into my coat, pulled out 10 years of receipts, mortgage, groceries, medical bills, and said, "Then ask Logan to pay for everything from now on." I walked out. No yelling, no drama, just truth. That moment broke our family's silence, and the man they called reliable finally stopped showing up. I'm Ethan, and this is how I took my life back without ever raising my voice. The smell of rosemary chicken filled the small kitchen, mixing with the distant hum of country music from the radio perched on the windowsill. My mother had always liked to keep things simple. No candles, no fanfare, just family food and that unspoken rule that dinner was sacred. It was her 65th birthday, and I had driven 3 hours from Nashville to be here in Lexington, Kentucky, just like every year. But this time felt different, heavier. We were halfway through the meal when it happened. My fork hovered mid-air, a piece of green bean dangling, when my mother turned to me with that familiar look. The same one she used to give me when I forgot to tie my shoes before church. "Ethan, you know you could learn a thing or two from Logan." I let the fork fall subtly onto the plate. Logan, sitting across from me in his tailored blazer and polished smile, didn't say a word. He just sipped his wine. Of course he didn't have to say anything. He never did. That was the game. He showed up and soaked in the praise while I swallowed whatever bitterness came with the side dishes. She kept going. Logan's clinic just opened its 3rd branch last week. Can you believe it? He's barely 34. Dr. Harper has such a nice ring to it, doesn't it? My father chuckled low under his breath. Logan offered a modest smile, like he hated the attention, but we all knew better. It was rehearsed, perfectly timed humility, the Golden Sun performance. I glanced down at my plate. My palms felt warm. My chest was tight. I told myself to let it go like I always did. But this time something snapped. Maybe it was the way Mom said it, like a final verdict. "You'll never be as good as your brother." I looked up, met her eyes, and I smiled. "Well then," I said, "maybe you should ask him to pay for everything from now on." The silence was immediate, utter. Forks froze mid-motion, glasses paused mid-sip. My mother blinked confused. Logan leaned back slightly, like he'd misheard me. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope, set it gently beside the casserole dish. My father eyed it warily. I looked at no one in particular. "That's 10 years of bank statements," I said. "Mortgage payments, utility bills, medical insurance premiums, birthday checks, groceries, every dime I've sent since 2013. Maybe Logan can take over now." My voice was even. No malice, no tremor. I had rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times, but it had always ended with shouting. Not this time. This time I wanted them to feel it. The weight of every unspoken sacrifice. My mother opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Her eyes scanned the top sheet, then the next. The room was so quiet I could hear the radiator ticking in the hallway. You paid off the house loan." "Twice," I said. "Once in 2015 when Dad lost his pension fund. Then again in 2020 when Logan's clinic needed that emergency loan. It was my credit that got it approved, by the way." My father looked like he might speak but said nothing. Logan shifted in his seat. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Mom asked. I shrugged. "Because it was never about credit. But if I'm always going to be the disappointment, then maybe I should stop acting like the provider." Logan finally spoke. "Ethan, come on, this isn't the place." "Sure it is," I said. "It's Mom's birthday. It's the perfect time to celebrate the person who actually kept this family from falling apart." I stood up. No slamming of chairs, no angry storm out. I pushed in my seat gently and reached for my coat. The table was still frozen. "Where are you going?" Mom asked, her voice small. "Home. I've got a long drive." "Ethan, please," my father said. I paused at the doorway, turned back once. "Logan, good luck with the next 10 years. You're gonna need it." Then I walked out. Into the cold Lexington air. No one followed. The drive back to Nashville was quiet. The roads were mostly empty, just long stretches of interstate cutting through black nothingness, broken up by the occasional gas station or diner glowing faintly in the dark. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need the distraction. My thoughts were loud enough. Each mile that passed felt like a layer being peeled off a decade of silence shedding away. I should have felt lighter. I didn't. I got home around midnight. My apartment smelled like coffee grounds and old books. I tossed my keys on the counter, slipped off my shoes, and stood for a moment in the kitchen without moving. My hands gripped the edge of the sink. I hadn't cried in years, and I didn't plan to tonight, but something inside me clenched so tight I thought I might implode. They had looked at me like I was a stranger after everything. 10 years, every check, every favor, every call at 2 a.m. because the heat broke or someone forgot how to use online banking. And yet the moment I stopped playing the role, the script fell apart. Logan was their son. I was the utility. I poured a glass of water and sat on the couch. The envelope I had shown them earlier was still in my coat pocket. I took it out, ran my thumb along the crease. It had taken me a week to print and organize it, not because I needed proof for them, but because I needed proof for myself, that I wasn't imagining it, that I had in fact been holding up the family scaffolding while they handed Logan the spotlight. Back in 2011, I was 24, fresh out of undergrad, and I had just been accepted into the MBA program at Kellogg School of Management in Chicago. Full ride. It was the kind of offer that makes people cry on camera in those cheesy college commercials. I was packing my bags, researching housing, already planning what my focus would be. Corporate strategy. I had dreams back then. Wild, messy, ambitious ones. I wanted to build something, run something. I had this image of myself in a glass office high above a city skyline. And then Dad had a stroke. It happened on a Sunday. I was still in town for the summer, crashing at my parents' place in Lexington. One moment he was standing in the driveway fixing the gutter, the next he was on the ground. His right side limp face twisted, unable to speak. The ambulance took 6 minutes. Those 6 minutes changed the next 10 years of my life. Logan was unreachable. He was in Cancun celebrating finishing his first year of med school. His phone was off. I left voicemails. I sent emails. No answer. So I stayed. At first it was just for the week, then a month, then the semester. By the time he called 3 weeks later, Mom had already begun relying on me like I was an extension of the medical team. She didn't ask if I was going back. She asked how long I could stay. The decision wasn't made with tears or begging. It was made with silence. The kind that says this is what's expected. You understand, don't you? I deferred my scholarship for a year, then again, and finally I let it go. They never brought it up again. Sometimes I wonder if they even remembered. If they realized what I gave up. Or if in their eyes I simply didn't go because I wasn't capable. Logan would have gone. Logan wouldn't have let anything stop him. I tried dating during that time. I met Michelle through a mutual friend. She was smart, sharp-witted, a junior attorney with dreams of opening her own practice. We hit it off fast, too fast maybe. She liked my ambition, my calmness under pressure. She liked how I made her feel grounded. She didn't like my family. It wasn't about them being rude or cold. They weren't. But every time she came over, she saw how quickly I faded into the background. How my mother would ask Logan about his latest patient but never ask me about work. How dinner conversations turned into Logan updates. How I excused myself to clean the kitchen while Logan was praised for lifting a finger. She told me once after dinner, "I don't think they even see you." I shrugged it off. "It's just how they are." "No, Ethan," she said, "it's how they are with you." We lasted a year. She left the day after Christmas. Said she loved me but couldn't watch me disappear anymore. I don't blame her. The envelope sat heavy in my lap. It wasn't just numbers, it was years. Years of swallowing pride, of working overtime, of skipping vacations, of carrying burdens that were never mine to carry alone. And still to them I would never be enough. Not compared to the golden boy who never stayed long enough to change a light bulb. I stood up and placed the envelope on the shelf beside the front door. I wasn't sure why I kept it. Maybe as a reminder, maybe as armor, maybe because part of me still needed to believe that one day someone would look at those pages and say thank you. But not them, not anymore. I went to bed that night without setting an alarm. For once, there was no one left to wake up early for. The sun was already high when I woke up. The clock on my nightstand read 10:27. My phone had a few missed calls, none from anyone I cared to see. I rolled out of bed, poured some cereal, and sat at the kitchen table staring out the window. A cardinal landed on the railing of the fire escape, chirping like it had something urgent to say. I envied its freedom. Later that afternoon, I found myself in the garage. I hadn't planned on cleaning, but something about silence always pushed me toward old boxes. I opened a few bins, pulling out books, tangled Christmas lights, and a dusty box labeled Ethan's school stuff in Mom's handwriting. The tape was yellowed, the cardboard sagging. Inside, I found my old math trophies, a few participation ribbons from science fairs, and a laminated certificate from the Kentucky State Mathematics League. Second place. My name printed neatly in gold foil. I had forgotten about that one. I was 15, a sophomore. I had spent weeks preparing for that competition, practicing problem sets late into the night while Logan practiced piano in the next room. I came home that day with the medal around my neck, proud, waiting for someone to notice. Mom had smiled, said, "That's nice, honey," then turned to Logan and asked if he was ready for his recital at church. I held the certificate in my hands now. Edges curled, dust clinging to the corners. There was a sticky note on the back with my old locker combination written in faded ink. I wondered if Mom even remembered I had won anything. Probably not. But she could still recall the song Logan played at his senior recital, Claire de Lune. She mentioned it last Christmas, eyes misty like it was some sacred family heirloom. I dug deeper into the box. More forgotten accolades. A ribbon from the regional spelling bee. A certificate of recognition from the governor's youth leadership program. None of them had ever made it to the living room wall. That space was reserved for Logan's newspaper clippings, framed photos in his lab coat, and a shadow box with the scalpel he used on his first real surgery. Dad hung it himself like it was the Medal of Honor. Back in high school, I used to tell myself it didn't matter. That recognition was for the insecure, that doing good should be its own reward. I believed that until it started to hurt. Until I realized how lonely it was to carry responsibility without acknowledgement. How invisible I had become in my own family. One Thanksgiving, I was 13. I made the entire green bean casserole from scratch. Followed the recipe from a cooking magazine I had found in the school library. I even added fried shallots instead of the usual canned onions. I waited the whole meal for someone to ask who made it. No one did. They were too busy complimenting Logan's impromptu performance of Silent Night on the piano, even though he played the same sue every year. Years later, when I brought it up to Mom, she said, "Oh, I thought that was one of the store-bought sides." I put the math certificate back in the box, closed it, and slid it onto a shelf in the back. Not out of shame, but because I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone but myself. That chapter of my life was finished, even if the ink had never dried. I sat down on the concrete floor for a moment, wiping dust off my hands. The air was thick with the scent of oil and cardboard. I remembered how Logan used to hate coming down here. Said it was too dirty, too cramped. I used to love it. It was where I fixed broken radios and took apart old VCRs just to see how they worked. It was my space, the only place I wasn't compared to him. Dad once told me I was the quiet one. Said it like it was a compliment wrapped in disappointment. Logan was loud, charming, the center of attention. I was methodical, calm. They said I was reliable, which I eventually learned meant we don't have to worry about you. You'll take care of yourself. But even the reliable break. I stood up, wiped my palms on my jeans, and went back inside. The envelope was still on the shelf. I looked at it again, this time with less anger, more curiosity. A decade of financial transactions, each one a silent prayer that maybe this time they'd see me. Maybe this time I'd matter more than Logan's latest achievement. But prayers whispered in silence rarely get answered. I went to my desk and opened my laptop, pulled up an old folder marked college files. It hadn't been touched in years. Inside were PDFs of my acceptance letter, scholarship awards, scanned copies of forms I never submitted. The header on one read Kellogg School of Management. I stared at it for a long time. Then I closed the laptop, stood up, and walked to the window. The cardinal was gone, the railing empty, but the sky was clear, and for the first time in a long while, so was my mind. In early 2016, Dad's health started to slip again. The stroke years earlier had left its mark, and though he managed to recover a good portion of his speech and mobility, the long-term effects crept in slowly like rust under the paint. His prescriptions piled up. Doctor visits became routine. Insurance got messy. At first I helped with the paperwork. Then gradually I started footing the bills. It was never a big conversation. Just small things at first. A copay here, an unpaid balance there. Then came the Medicare gap, the out-of-pocket maximums, the endless phone calls to Blue Cross. One day I noticed the power bill hadn't been paid in over a month. I covered it, assuming it had just slipped their mind. Then it became every month. Eventually I offered to put all the recurring bills on autopay through my account. I told Dad it would just make things easier. He nodded, tired, distracted, not fully understanding what that meant. So the utilities were switched over, but still in his name. I didn't ask for thanks. I didn't expect applause. It felt like the right thing to do. Mom kept saying how lucky we were that Logan helped so much. I heard it again and again. At church luncheons, at Thanksgiving dinners, at casual phone calls that turned into monologues about Logan's latest charity or promotion. She'd say things like, "I don't know what we'd do without him." Meanwhile, I was the one transferring $300 every time the HVAC went out. One Sunday afternoon, Logan called me. I remember because I was at a Kroger, standing between the dairy and the bread aisle, holding a gallon of milk in one hand and my phone in the other. "Hey man, listen, I was just on the phone with Mom. She's going on about the electric bill and how it's all taken care of." "You've been handling that, right?" "Yeah," I said. "For a while now." He paused. "You didn't tell her it was you, did you?" "No. I figured she assumed it was you anyway." "Okay, good. Let's keep it that way. It just makes her feel better. She thinks I've got things under control. You know how she is. Gets anxious if she thinks I'm too busy to take care of them." I stood there, heart-sinking milk getting warm in my hand. So you're fine with her believing it's your money covering all this? It's not about that, he said quickly. It's about her peace of mind. She worries less when she thinks I'm the one providing. It's not like you care about the credit, right? You've always been the low-key one. I said nothing, just listened to the hum of the freezer beside me. I mean, you're doing great, man, seriously. But Mom's old school. If she thinks I've got the bills, she sleeps better. That's what matters. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see me. Yeah, sure. Appreciate you, man, he said before hanging up. I paid for the groceries and sat in my car in the parking lot for a full 10 minutes staring out the windshield. That was the moment something shifted. Not all at once, but a quiet fracture deep in the foundation. I realized then that truth had no place in our family. Only performance. And I was the stagehand behind the curtain, making sure the lights stayed on while Logan took a bow. That night I opened a spreadsheet. I labeled it quietly, plainly. Family expenses. I began to enter every payment I made. Dates, amounts, service providers. I added a column for notes. Sometimes I typed out what had happened that day, not for proof, for memory, because even invisible sacrifices deserve to be remembered. January 12, 2016. Paid $124.76 to Kentucky Utilities. Mom called twice about the thermostat. March 3, 2016. Covered Dad's eye surgery copay. $809. Logan never returned my text. June 8, 2016. Sent $250 for new water heater installation. Logan mentioned it at dinner like he arranged it. By the end of that year, the spreadsheet was over 30 lines long. By the end of 2017, it was 100. No one ever asked how the lights stayed on. They just assumed Logan had paid the bill. In 2018, Mom needed dental implants. The insurance didn't cover the full amount. Logan promised to handle it. 2 months passed. The clinic called me directly. I paid the balance, $3,600. She sent Logan a thank you card. He forwarded me a photo of it, laughing, saying Mom still had great handwriting. I didn't reply. I kept recording. In 2019, they moved into a smaller house. Dad said it was time to downsize. I offered to help with the moving expenses. Logan nodded like it was his idea. At one point, while carrying boxes into the garage, I saw him on the phone. He was telling someone how hard it was managing everything for our parents. He used the word burden. I walked back to my car that night with dirt on my jeans and a smile on my face so tight it felt glued there. By then, my spreadsheet had its own folder, with receipts, PDFs of bills, scanned checks. I didn't know what I was saving it for. Maybe for a moment of clarity, maybe so that one day if anyone ever asked, I could answer without flinching. I never confronted Logan, not then. I knew it wouldn't matter. He'd say I was being dramatic, that it wasn't about recognition, that I was overthinking things. But I wasn't. I was just done being erased. The spreadsheet kept growing, and so did the space between who they thought I was and who I had become. Quiet, reliable, present, but not passive, not anymore. It was a rainy Thursday when I saw her again. I had just stepped into Midtown Grounds, the coffee shop near my office in Nashville, one of those places with reclaimed wood tables and handwritten chalkboard menus. I was reaching for the lid to my cup when I heard my name, soot but certain. Ethan. I turned and there she was. Erica Lee. Same almond eyes, same calm posture. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, cut just below the chin, and there was a quiet confidence in the way she held her cup. Erica. Wow. Hey. She smiled and for a second time folded. We were 25 again, sitting on the hood of her car watching fireworks on the 4th of July. But that image flickered and vanished, replaced by the years in between. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said. "I'm in town visiting my sister. I saw your name on the law firm sign down the block. Figured it might be you." We ended up sitting by the window. The conversation was polite, careful. Work weather, mutual friends. I told her I still did estate law, mostly for small clients. She said she was running a wellness program for a private school in Charlotte. She looked good, settled, like someone who'd done the hard work of healing. After a lull, she glanced at her hands, then back at me. "I've thought about reaching out before," she said, "but I wasn't sure if I had the right to." "You didn't need permission." Still, I wasn't proud of how I left. I nodded. It hurt at the time, but I got it. I wanted to say more, but I didn't know how to shape it. The truth was, I had buried the memory of that breakup so deep that digging it up felt like disturbing a grave. But seeing her again stirred everything. She hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "There's something I've wanted to ask you, and feel free to tell me to mind my business. Go ahead. Back when we were still together near the end, your brother called me." "Logan." I sat up straighter. "Yeah. He said some things. About your family, about you." My fingers curled around the cup. "What kind of things?" She took a breath. "He said you had stopped coming around because you were too busy with work. That your mom was sick and you left her to deal with it on her own. That you didn't want the responsibility." My heart thudded. Slow, loud. "He said that." She nodded, watching me closely. "I remember because it didn't sound like you. But I was already confused, overwhelmed. Your parents were cold to me, and every time I tried to ask you what was going on, you shut down." I stared past her into the rain streaking the window. The memory of that year came back in pieces. The arguments, her frustration, my silence. I had blamed myself for the relationship crumbling. Thought maybe I'd failed at being emotionally present. Never once did I think Logan was feeding her lies behind my back. "I had to say something," she said. "I don't know why he'd do that, but it always felt strategic." It was. The words came out before I could stop them. Logan was always good at shaping the story, keeping the spotlight. I was easier to dismiss if I looked like the unreliable one. Why? Because I was the only one who ever challenged him. And I never did it publicly, so he filled in the blanks for people. She looked down, then back up. "I'm sorry. I should have come to you directly. You did what anyone would do. He gave you a version of me that made your doubts easier to believe." She reached across the table, her fingers grazing mine. "You didn't deserve that." "I'm sorry, Ethan." I forced a smile, but inside something cracked, not from heartbreak, from the confirmation. Logan hadn't just taken credit for what I did. He had actively rewritten who I was. We sat in silence for a while. The rain softened. She checked her watch. "I should go. My sister's expecting me." "Of course." She stood, hesitated, then leaned in and kissed my cheek. A soft old warmth. "Take care of yourself, Ethan. Really. You too." I watched her walk out. The bell above the door jingled once, then quiet. I sat there motionless, the coffee cold in front of me. Later that night, I opened my laptop, found the spreadsheet, added a new tab. Title: Lies. First entry. Date: March 20 incident. Erica informed me Logan told her I abandoned Mom during illness. Outcome: relationship ended months later due to stress and misinformation. The truth in black and white. I stared at the screen. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about identity, reputation, trust. He had stolen things from me that couldn't be refunded, and he thought I'd stay quiet, but not anymore. The ballroom at the Nashville Civic Center was dressed in gold and navy. White linen tablecloths, centerpieces with floating candles, and a jazz trio playing softly in the corner. The night was for Logan, a celebration hosted by the Regional Medical Board honoring him as Physician of the Year. His name was on the banner hanging across the stage, bold letters in serif font. Dr. Logan Harper, MD. I had received the invitation a month earlier. A generic email copied to the entire extended family. I almost didn't go, but something told me I needed to see it for myself. When I arrived, my parents were already seated at the center table, glowing like royalty. My mother wore a navy blue dress that matched the decor, her pearls perfectly in place. My father's suit looked new, probably a gift from Logan. Their smiles were wide, but only when they looked at him. I kept to a table near the back, didn't want to be front and center. I greeted a few cousins, nodded at a couple of former neighbors. Logan was busy taking photos near the stage, his arm draped over the shoulder of one hospital executive after another. Eventually, the MC took the microphone and launched into a speech about Logan's accomplishments. The clinical trials, the pediatric cases, the volunteer trips overseas. Then came the family segment. We're honored tonight to have Dr. Harper's proud parents here with us. Would Joseph and Helen Harper please join us on stage? The room applauded as they walked up. Mom clutched Dad's arm like she had just won an award herself. They reached the podium and Mom adjusted the microphone. We always knew Logan was special, she said, her voice smooth with pride. Even as a little boy, he was always curious, always driven. He used to play doctor with his teddy bear and ask questions no one else would think to ask. We couldn't be prouder. He's our greatest blessing, our one true pride. I sat still. The word "one" clanged in my ears like a dropped dish. A few people clapped politely. Most were too busy smiling at Logan, who stood with his hands behind his back, humble as ever, soaking in the applause. But I felt it, the sting, not just of being forgotten, of being erased again. The speech went on a few minutes longer. Anecdotes, laughter. Then they stepped down and Logan took the stage. He gave the kind of speech that wins rooms. Modest, gracious, funny, in the right places. He thanked his mentors, his colleagues, and of course his parents. He didn't mention me, not once. I waited until dessert to slip away. As I moved past the tables, a hand touched my arm. I turned and saw her, Sylvia Briggs. She had been our neighbor for 20 years back in Lexington. Widowed early, sharp-eyed, always kind to me in a way others weren't. She leaned in, speaking low. I remember you paid for their house, Ethan. Am I wrong? I blinked. No, you're not wrong. She nodded slowly, eyes scanning the crowd. Funny, you'd think someone would have mentioned that, just once. I smiled, small and tired. You'd think. She gave my arm a squeeze. Don't let them make you small. You were always the one holding things together. I thanked her, then stepped outside. The air was cool, damp with late spring humidity. I walked to the edge of the parking lot, stood under a streetlight, and let the silence settle. That night, something changed. It wasn't rage, it wasn't even sadness, it was clarity. I had never wanted the stage, never needed applause, but I also didn't deserve to be cast as an extra in a life I'd helped fund. They could call him their pride, but I was the one who paid the mortgage, the medical bills, the groceries, the insurance. I was the one who made sure the water ran, the lights stayed on, and the property taxes were paid on time. No more hiding behind silence. No more letting Logan write the narrative. I walked to my car, unlocked it, and sat behind the wheel. The event banner still fluttered in the distance, but the real story hadn't even started yet. I left the Civic Center and drove home in silence. The banner celebrating Logan's success faded behind me, but the weight of his staged applause followed me all the way to my apartment. I unlocked the door and walked in, closing it gently behind me. I didn't go to bed. Instead, I went to my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up my work email still signed in from earlier that day. I scrolled through my pending messages and one caught my eye from my former employer, Blue Haven Tech Solutions. The subject line read, Project Delphine Update. My heart sank, but I clicked it anyway. The email said the Delphine initiative was moving in a new direction and I wouldn't be part of the team anymore. No explanation beyond that. I stared at the words numb, then flicked back to my spreadsheet labeled lies where I had logged Logan's deceit. And then I realized I needed proof. I called my old boss, Brandon Tate. His voicemail picked up and I left a short message asking to meet. The tone was simple and professional. I waited. A few days later, we met at a quiet cafe near the office district in downtown Nashville. Brandon looked exactly the same as he had during my employment, worn but sharp, tired eyes behind thick glasses. I thanked him for meeting and he nodded carefully. "Seems like you got blindsided," he said. "I didn't know what had happened until I saw that email. We were expecting you to lead Delphine through to Q2. That partnership was solid. Where was that from again?" He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "From what I heard, your brother had some involvement. He got to know the partner played up his hospital's new research promised blue sky projections. But when legal dug in, nothing was real, not the company, not the proposal. It was a shell, a facade built to impress." My head buzzed. Logan had been bragging at family dinners about connecting me to a high-value partner. I had seen the name signed, the NDA drafted charts. I'd believed him. "Are you sure it was him?" I asked. Brandon exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry, Ethan," he said. "I wish this wasn't how you found out. But yes, everything points back to Logan." I closed my eyes. The room felt too bright, too small. "What did I do wrong?" I said. "You did nothing wrong," Brandon said. "You were the best fit." "But your brother played it smart. He built the story first and everyone believed it. You were collateral." I went back to my apartment, sat at my desk again and stared at both spreadsheets. One marked every expense, the other every lie. I realized it was bigger now. Not just a matter of being unseen or erased or dismissed, but actively undermined, sabotaged. That evening, I packed a box of things from my desk: photos, awards, personal notebooks, stuff that reminded me of who I was outside their story. The next morning, I drove to Lexington. I walked into the house as if through a fog. Dad was reading in his chair. Mom answered the door with practiced warmth. But I already felt distant. I asked to speak in the den. They followed, not noticing the box tucked under my arm. I stood behind the door and spoke plainly. I was offered a promotion at Blue Haven, a leadership role. But the project was taken away without explanation. I know Logan was involved, invited the partner. It failed. I lost my job because of it. My mother's eyes filled with surprise. "Your brother never said any of that," she said. "Because he didn't want to," I said. "He needed to be the hero, even if that meant building the stage on lies." My father looked at me defeated and shook his head. I didn't stay long. No yelling, no demands, just a short walk to the front door. I left the box in the hallway, picked up my jacket. Then I walked out. The drive back to Nashville was calm. I didn't feel the need to rush. Quiet, reliable, present, that I was called for so long, but never letting that define me. And for the first time, I knew the cost was too real to ignore, but also the fact that I didn't have to bear all this alone anymore. I packed a single suitcase and a shipping box of files and mementos and left Lexington at dawn. The drive back to Nashville felt strangely light, as though I was shedding more than just clothes and paperwork. I stopped at a rest area halfway, stepped onto the damp grass and took a deep breath. No guilt, no longing, just relief. 2 days later, I closed on the house that had been in my name for years. The real estate agent handled the paperwork, and I watched the transfer documents change hands. Part of me expected a pang as the house was finally sold, but there wasn't one. Just a soft exhale, it's done. With the proceeds, I settled my remaining debts and secured a small rental closer to downtown Nashville. It was modest, a one-bedroom apartment with a balcony overlooking a courtyard, perfect for a fresh start. That's when I reached out to Nora Wilson. We met one rainy morning in her small office above a boutique interior design shop. She looked up from her desk as I walked in, rain still beaded on my coat. Her expression was warm, precise, professional. "I need your help," I told her. The papers, the property I signed over, they weren't explained properly. I was vulnerable and grieving. I was manipulated. Nora leaned forward. "Show me everything." In the weeks that followed, she combed through the documents showing I had transferred deeds rights access, all titled in my name, over to Logan with the justification that I was temporarily incapacitated. That excuse was written on legal letterhead dated shortly after I was fired from Blue Haven. I remember that period vividly. I had sat in a corner of the apartment staring at bills, thinking I was too broken to even speak. They came with the papers. "Just sign," they said. "It will help." It felt urgent, compassionate. Now I saw the declaration for what it was: premeditated. Nora looked at me across the table, her eyes clear. "You were taken advantage of," she said. "But you don't have to sue. You've already removed yourself from the equation. You have documentation now." I nodded. No courtroom, no bitterness, just boundaries. So I walked away. I stopped sending money. I stopped answering calls. I paused everything that tied me to that life. I changed my mailing address. I even let the family email chain go cold. It felt final and freeing. I took my time settling into the apartment on Elm Street. I filled it slowly, bookshelves, a desk, a record player. I'd forgotten how good the hum of everyday life could feel when no one else controlled the story. Several weeks later, I got a message, a forwarded chain of financial statements and legal documents, all highlighted. No signature, no explanation. It was from Mom, a plea to reverse the document, to talk. I deleted it. I heard from Logan once after that. He sent a text, "Hope you're well." I paused for a moment, drawn to reply. But I didn't. I deleted it too. Then I planted herbs on the balcony: basil, rosemary, mint. Every morning I watered them, and the sunlight coaxed them open. Small things. Quiet things. Things I did for me. One night I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea. The city lights blinked below, and I could hear distant traffic, a dog barking, a late train whistle somewhere far off. No expectations, no demands, not yet. The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, breaking the serene silence of my apartment. I stared at it, knowing exactly whose name would appear when I glanced down. Mom. The ring kept going and going. I didn't answer. A week passed and the phone lit up again. Missed call from Dad. I didn't call back. 2 days later, when I checked the news, my stomach dropped. There it was, an article in the Nashville Herald, small print but heavy truths. Logan was under IRS investigation. Allegations of false tax filings, improper use of my bank accounts to process transactions. Headlines about physicians disgraced by financial misconduct. I read the article twice, heart pounding. I walked out to the balcony, the evening air cool on my face. Neighbors laughed below, unaware of the storm. My phone lit up again. This time a text from Dad. "Ethan, we need your help. Could you come home? Help us figure out what's going on with the IRS." I deleted the message without hesitation. Later that night, I received an email with documents attached. Tax forms, bank statements, notices from the IRS. All difficult to follow, yet clearly implying that my account had been used to funnel cash, possibly to cover Logan's clinic expenses. My parents' names were on certain pages, transcripts from conversations, frantic pleading, blaming me for mismanaging finances. I closed the laptop. My chest tightened. Panic rose, but it was muted, distant. I wasn't in danger yet, but their desperation was. That weekend I heard from Erica. A short message saw about Logan. "I'm sorry I didn't respond." Then from Brandon Hurd, shocking news. "Call me if you want." I ignored it too. The phone rang again. A local IRS agent's number. I let it go to voicemail. The recorded voice stated that Logan had been referred to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, alleged to have used my identity to file false returns and move money. The message requested I call back. I stared at the voicemail. The auditor might consider transferee liability. If assets were moved through my account, even unknowingly, I could be held liable under certain circumstances. No guilt, no ownership, just proximity. I turned off the phone and sat in the dark. 1 year ago, I sought peace. I built a quiet life where I wasn't just present, but alone. Now that distance was both shield and prison. I didn't pick up the phone again. A week later, the doorbell rang. I opened to find a courier, a single manila envelope with the IRS logo. Inside, a notice that I had been notified as a concerned party. Not a target yet, but part of the investigation's scope. I placed it unopened on the counter. My thoughts drifted to the herbs on the balcony, basil mint thriving in quiet sunlight. Life adapting, life pushing back. That night I sat at my desk and opened a new tab in the spreadsheet folder, the one labeled Lies. I titled the new tab Investigation. Then I shut the laptop and turned off the light. I stood, walked to the balcony, and breathed in deep. The city was quiet. The world moved on. I sat there listening, waiting, knowing whatever came next I would face on my own terms. I woke up to a ping from my newsfeed, an unexpected ripple in the quiet of my new life. A link headlined "Voice of Nashville" saying a local lawyer's blog had carried a story someone had written about a man who silently held a family together while everyone else watched the hero. I hesitated, then clicked. It was Erica's byline. I read in stunned silence. She described a quiet, reliable man who sacrificed his plans, his dreams, even his happiness to keep his family afloat. Someone who did the right thing in the background without seeking attention. Her words felt like a warm light in a dark room, recognition arriving from outside. What I thought was my world. The post was gentle but firm. She wrote of the good man people overlooked and how silence doesn't mean absence. She gently reminded readers that compassion is often unspoken, not in the loud offers of help. I felt something loosen in my chest, a weight lifting but leaving an echo. Someone saw me. I closed the laptop and stepped out onto the balcony. It was dusk, the sky softening. I didn't look down at my messages until later. There were texts from people I hadn't heard from in years. Old colleagues, neighbors. They mentioned the article. One even wrote, "I didn't know you paid off the house until now. You never had to be the story, but you deserve to be heard." My phone buzzed again. A Facebook notification. Comments under Erica's post. Sylvia had written there too that she remembered everything, how Ethan paid for renovations insurance, the repairs. The community under her words began to respond, thanking me for stepping aside, acknowledging my kindness, apologizing for taking it for granted. I scrolled until my thumbs hurt. Later that evening, I got a call from the church where my parents were active in Lexington. A member of the church board told me that amid the IRS fallout and growing scandal, the congregation had voted when Mom came forward to serve as elder or group leader. They decided it was better she step down. They cited too much division, too many rumors. I pressed the phone away, phone still at my ear, closing my eyes. The rejection stung, but it was cathartic in a strange way. It wasn't personal anymore. It was the logical result of allowing lies and neglect to flourish. I remembered the silent dinners, the applause I collected in my absence, the nights alone when everyone else was cheered for someone else's work. And now I realized the justice had come. Not through my voice, not through my protest, but through truth spoken quietly, courageously from people who saw. I set aside the phone and looked out over the balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. No soundtrack, no echo of applause. Just a quiet, steady rhythm of living, breathing, finally unburdened. I closed my eyes and exhaled. Justice arrived without noise, and sometimes that is enough. I opened the morning paper and scanned the headline about Dr. Samuel Harper, formerly one of Nashville's rising medical stars. His license had been suspended immediately following the IRS investigation, and his assets were frozen pending further review. His clinic had closed, patients were being redirected. It was all over the local news, though no one connected the dots until now. I folded the paper and set it aside without really registering the news. In a way, it felt like old news, like reading about someone whose story I had already outgrown. The knock on my door came as I was brewing coffee downstairs. It was calmer than I expected. 3 soft taps. I wasn't waiting for anyone, but I knew who it was. Mom and Dad stood there. Mom's eyes were red, bagged with tiredness. Dad's posture was stooped, as though he carried more weight than time required. "May we come in?" "Yes." They slipped inside. I invited them to sit, then gestured toward coffee. Dad accepted. Mom held the mug in both hands, staring at the rim. "I've been reading," Dad began. "I didn't mention your name." "We didn't expect this." He looked down, voice cracking. "Your brother's license has been suspended. Everything is tied up and the bank account's frozen." My throat throbbed, not with satisfaction, but I set my mug down and nodded. "I'm sorry," Mom said quietly. "For everything. For not seeing you for who you were. For everything you did and we called it expected." There was no anger in my chest, nothing fierce or violent, just solidity. "I am sorry. That was enough. You to look after our reputation," Mom said, voice too soft. "You carried us all but never let us know how heavy it was for you." I slid into a chair, let the words settle around me before replying. "Hãy nhớ Logan như mọi người từng nói." My voice was calm, not cruelty, not spite, just clarity. They looked startled, but she nodded slowly, head trembling like a leaf in still air. Then they stood, Dad steadying her hand. "Thank you, Ethan, for everything, for allowing us time. I'll say that only once." They left as gently as they arrived. No more words, just the sound of the door closing behind them and the quiet afterward hitting harder than any confrontation. I walked to my record player in the corner, placed a vinyl on the turntable and let it spin. The warm crackle of acoustic guitar filled the room. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel triumphant, but I felt present. like I'd walked out of someone else's script and into my own. Outside, the city moved on, cars passing, children laughing in a playground beyond. The sun filtered through the curtains, making gold patterns on the floor. I sat down and let the music carry me not backward but onward. I placed the needle on the vinyl and closed my eyes, letting the soft guitar drift through the room in steady, reassuring rhythms. The music felt like a gentle exhale after years of holding my breath. I stood and walked to the window, leaning against the frame, watching the bustle of Nashville life below. People walking, dogs, a delivery truck pulling up to a row of townhouses, families gathered for weekend brunch. Earlier that week, I opened my apartment door to a group of college students. Nervous, hopeful, they had RSVP'd to the mentoring program I launched through a community tech collective. I'd set up a modest space in the back half of my place, cleared out a desk, arranged chairs, and set up an old whiteboard. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and now it was theirs, a place to ask questions, make mistakes, and learn. I greeted the first student, a sophomore majoring in computer science, and offered a cup of coffee while we talked about algorithms and career paths. The next hour passed in conversation, debugging code, resume tips, navigating internships. I realized I'd missed this, sharing knowledge, encouraging someone who still believed in their future. There was no expectation of recognition, applause, or compensation. Just connection. Sometimes the students thanked me with words I barely recognized at first. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for giving your time. I would smile, saying you're worth being seen, just like I finally allowed it for myself. Now sitting here at the window, the crackle of the record echoing the quiet peace I've found, I felt the story close with a sense of completeness. There was no grand finale, no celebratory cloak, just life, ordinary, honest, and deeply quiet. And in the echo of that music, I whispered to myself, forgiveness isn't given because they deserved it, but because I deserve peace. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. If you've ever felt unseen or overlooked in your own family, you're not alone. I'd love to hear your story in the comments.